Good morning and welcome to Business Minds. I'm Cindy Bird. My co host Melissa Smith is out of town today. She'll be back to join me next week. I really thank you for tuning in today, and I'm excited to share with you the topic of social learning, specifically 3 ways that you can tap into the power of social learning for your business or organization. When Melissa and I started Business Minds, we had a really strong purpose that we wanted to pursue, and that was to create a place for business owners, but also just people in general who are interested in business to connect, to collaborate, and to learn from one another. And that's really what social learning is all about, is people coming together, connecting, collaborating, and taking away learning from just having interacted with each other. So I want to today spend time, though, providing more insight into social learning, explaining a little bit more in depth. How did we come up with that concept even of social learning? And also talk about the significance of social learning, and then get into those 3 ways that you can specifically tap into it in your business or organization. So I'll start by asking a question for you to think about up front. If you could have more engaged employees, more innovation going on in your business or organization, more application of learning. So after you send someone away for a training or you have an educational program conducted in-house, if you actually see people using that learning. And if you could achieve, of course, just overall general increase in your business performance, would you do something to make those things happen? I hope the answer is a resounding yes. So I'm going to tell you today about how social learning can be a way to make those things happen. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about social learning first, and just learning in general. It's for as long as man has been on the face of this earth, as people have been on the face of this earth, learning has been taking place. Learning comes from multiple sources. But after about 50 years of research, the Center for Creative Leadership in the 1980s developed a more focused view of the main sources of how we learn. So Tim's going to put up a visual that will show you how this breaks down. And they really did their research based on looking at high performers and high performance organizations, and looking at how did these businesses and individuals in these businesses get to be those high performers based on where their learning came from. So this visual that you're going to see on the screen here in just a moment shows you that breakdown of those percentages. 10% formal programs, structured learning. That's the source of our learning. So that's structured training, educational programs that you might attend. 90% of our learning comes, though, from informal sources, is what all of these years of research determined. And that's pretty significant to know. So what do we mean by informal? We mean that it's unstructured, it's spontaneous. Oftentimes, it's driven by the learner themselves, that they will be the ones initiating their own learning and taking responsibility for their own learning in some way. The great thing is, as you can see from the visual on the screen there, is we now know that out of that 90, that's further broken down in. So the 90% that's informal learning can be broken down further, that 70% is associated with experiential learning, or learning by doing, learning on the job, if you will. The other 20% of our informal learning comes from social learning, learning with others and through others. So this model can be the basis for a new mindset. And let me just read you a description of what that new mindset sounds like. Work is the new classroom. The internet is the new library. Your colleagues and people in your other networks and sources of contacts are the faculty. Performance on the job is the final exam. And learning speed is the competitive advantage. So what that means is, of course, the faster you learn, the quicker you can perform. And in some industries, if not all, that's a pretty significant source of competitive advantage. In other words, if you can ride down that learning curve in a hurry. I was with a group of small business owners this morning and I asked what their biggest challenge is. And one gentleman spoke to me about the nature of his business. His business responds to emergency situations, to do disaster cleanup after fires and floods and so forth. And when you think about that, his need to have a fast learning curve is pretty important. So what weighs on his mind is having an onboarding process that can bring his employees quickly up to speed. So learning in general is so critical for the success of our businesses and organizations, but we can specifically make that learning curve a little bit easier to navigate if we think about social learning being a part of it. So I have another question for you. How have you learned informally over the last 24 hours? Think about that. Did you perhaps go on the internet to find something, a traditional Google search? Did you ask Alexa or Siri? Did you watch a YouTube video to learn how to prepare a new meal for your family or a new recipe? Did you post a question on social media to get other people's input? Did you look up a life hack? Again, using technology to do that. Did you text a friend or a family member? Most of these fall into the category of social learning. And here's what's significant about social learning. When we have the presence of other people and the support of other people, it actually enhances our ability to learn. It increases the likelihood that we're going to actually apply that learning. We're going to do something with that learning after it happens. It's not just storing knowledge, but we're really going to apply it. And it actually also has the power to produce some major innovations and performance improvements. The very device that you might be watching this program on right now, you owe to the existence of informal learning in general, but also in part to social learning. Smartphones wouldn't exist without the early pioneers of technology. If you look at Paul Allen, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, there were no formal programs to teach them how to invent something that didn't exist before. So they had no choice but to turn to informal learning through experimentation, but also they learned together. I think there's a reason why there were two of them involved in each case, and we know the rest of the story, of course, leading to the founding of Microsoft and Apple and the success that has happened with both. So as I mentioned earlier, today I want to talk to you about 3 ways that your business or organization can also tap into the power of social learning. Remember I said earlier that informal learning in general is spontaneous. So the idea here is to look at the social learning piece and say, how can I be more intentional about ensuring that social learning is happening rather than just leaving it by chance, leaving it to happen as it will. So that's what I want to share with you is 3 intentional ways that you can integrate social learning into your business or organization. The first one is feedback. Feedback's nothing new. We use it in many ways, both personally and in our businesses. We get customer feedback, we might request employee feedback, but how can you turn it into a social learning opportunity? You can do that by borrowing a concept from the military, from the Army in particular. The Army conducts after-action reviews. So a way to make social learning happen is to do some debriefs. So after a project has been launched or some other effort has happened inside of your business or organization, bring everybody together to discuss it. And this could also be used after a particularly challenging interaction with a customer, or maybe after a sales pitch. Anything really can be used to debrief. So what do you do during a debrief? You talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what could you have done differently, what did we learn from this, and then most importantly, what will we use that learning for? How will we use that learning moving forward? Oftentimes we stop at the first part when we do a debrief. We stop with what went well, what didn't go well, and maybe what we'll do differently next time. But we fail to bring in the learning piece. That's important. Have people talk together about what they learned, because perhaps everybody learned a little bit something different, and it's bringing people together to talk about what those different perspectives are that really taps into the power of social learning. Also, another form of feedback is to sound out your ideas. So this is you as an individual business person or an employee in an organization. You want to get advice or opinions on an idea that you have. Art Fry tapped into the power of this back when he invented Post-it notes at 3M. If you've ever heard that story, it's a quite interesting one. It was a mistake. There was a substance that didn't quite adhere that they were going to toss out as a mistake. At about the same time, Art Fry was in his church choir, and he was putting little pieces of paper in the hymnal to mark his pages. They were falling out. He thought, wouldn't it be great if I had some way to mark my pages, keep them open, but it wouldn't harm the page in the hymnal. So he took these two very different situations together, and he came up with Post-it notes, which honestly, I can't live without them these days. But what he couldn't do was he couldn't convince his colleagues to use the Post-it notes or to adopt them. So he made a prototype, and he distributed that prototype around the office. He actually had people use the Post-it notes and try them out and then get feedback on what people felt about them. So you don't have to go out and create a prototype, but just putting your idea out there and asking others' opinions about it can be really, really significant way to share that learning and to learn from other people. Another way to use feedback, a lot of companies have 180 or 360-degree feedback tools in place. And oftentimes what happens to that feedback is that it's used for private reflection, or it might be used just one-on-one between an employee and a supervisor. But what if that feedback became the basis for some open, facilitated discussion where everyone could learn from that feedback, including the person who it is directed at? More importantly, though, it's a way for the person to take away multiple perspectives and to not just look at the feedback in a one-sided way. Oftentimes we can look at it only how we see it and not get that value of learning from others' perspectives. So the second way you can tap into the power of using social learning in your business or organization is through mentoring and coaching. You know, a lot of times that feedback you get results in needing some coaching, or you seek a coach. And if you've had a mentor, you know the value of learning from that person. But on the flip side, being a mentor is another way to intentionally tap into the power of social learning. So being a mentor to someone in your business or organization is helpful. And I know, being a mentor myself, I always learn something from the person I'm mentoring as well. It really does work both ways. I have a colleague who I get together with several times a week. We walk the track at 5 Points in Washington, and she's jokingly calls it track talk with Cindy, or track time with Cindy. Well, I honestly feel like it's track time with her too, because I bounce ideas off of her. She might not realize it, but she's mentoring me in the process and has given me some great insights and perspectives and shared learning opportunities with me as well. So that mentoring and coaching can work both ways. So what about as a business owner? Intentionally, you could establish a mentoring program in your business or organization. Even as a small business, you could be more intentional about ensuring that a new employee has a mentor or has access to someone who could be that person for them. Another way under the mentoring and coaching category of social learning is to have colleagues teach each other. This is a way to spread best practices or to spread knowledge. You send one employee away to learn something new at a training program or a seminar, or maybe they've just finished their college degree. have them come back in and share that knowledge and teach colleagues within your organization what they've learned. They could share, in addition to best practices, maybe a work hack, something that makes them more effective and efficient that they've discovered. Why not take that and spread it around and let others learn how to do that and how to benefit from that as well? A third category under the mentoring and coaching concept is to request coaching from a colleague, from your supervisor, or to seek an outside coach, someone like Melissa or myself, or depending on what your need is. It takes a lot to say, wow, I don't know everything I know, or I have a weakness in this area, or this is a challenge for me that I just can't work through. But it allows you to not be isolated in your learning. Could you go out and read a book about it? Absolutely. Could you find an article that talks about the issue that you're dealing with? Sure. There's just something different about being able to talk with a person who has that coach mentality. A coach is really more than just a coach. They are a facilitator helping to open doors for you like a mentor does. A coach is someone there to help you assess your progress along the way. They're also there to support you, to cheer you on. I like to talk about coaching, though, as guiding my clients to aha moments. And that's really what you would want to look for in this social learning opportunity, too. When you start to share with other people what's going on, again, rather than having that one-sided perspective, that mindset that you have alone looking at it by yourself, you now have someone else who can bring their perspective and help you think it through. And maybe it's a block that you're dealing with, and you just need someone else to talk it over with and to help you through that block. When you're a small business owner and you're wearing so many hats, and maybe you are the owner solely, you're a solopreneur, you don't really have someone else to talk through these issues with and to learn with. And so seeking a coach or asking a colleague even to coach you, or a team of coaches, oftentimes having that support team with people that have various levels of expertise and perspectives to share with you can be a great opportunity as well. And one way you can tap into the more collective approach leads me to my third way that you can tap into the power of social learning for your business or organization. And that is to create or participate in communities of practice, or sometimes they're called communities of sharing. You could even establish one if you don't find a professional community that fits for you. There are a lot of online options of professional communities that you can get involved with. Again, depending on your industry, your type of business, and what it is you're looking for in the way of your learning. I know LinkedIn has professional learning communities based on industry. You can tap into some based on just specific area of interest even. And there are discussion boards. People will post a question, others will chime in. So you know how that works. It's a type of social learning, social media learning. When you look at offline examples, I want to spend just a few moments sharing some offline examples with you. So professional organizations in general, if you're a female business owner like myself, you could look to an organization like Women in Leadership has a chapter here in Peoria. You could look at NAWBO, the National Association of Women Business Owners, the Central Illinois chapter. I've been a member of going on 3 years now, and there's a lot of opportunities for social learning, for informal learning. Just coming to meetings, being able to listen to programs, but then talk about the topic. And once a month, the local NAWBO chapter has an event they call Information and Libations. Yes, it is usually held somewhere where you can enjoy a libation, but the idea is to bring people together in an informal way to learn with and from each other. And I'm excited to say that I'm going to be facilitating the information and libation session on April the 1st. If you'd like more information about that, you can visit the Central Illinois NAWBO website or look up the Central Illinois NAWBO page online. And I'm going to be talking about mindfulness and some easy ways to integrate mindfulness into your day. That'll be a fun topic to explore. Other organizations that I've benefited from in a professional way, being in the profession that I'm in as an educator, in the training world, there's the Association for Talent Development. There is a Heart of Central Illinois chapter. You know, any professional organization where you can come together with people who are dealing with the same concerns, challenges, issues, needs that you are is a great thing, because you can always find opportunities to meet up with them and to learn and share with them as well. And don't forget that when you share back, it's a way that expands your learning. You know, whenever you teach a subject to somebody else, there's research that you will do about that subject, and that's going to expand your learning as well. Also, another organization that I belong to locally is I've Decided. And I've Decided is an organization of community-wide difference makers and business members come together twice a month for what we call BYOB, which is Bring Your Own Business. Yes, it's a networking opportunity, but there's always a learning component involved as well. And oftentimes it's the fellow business members that are presenting one of the programs. So we're getting to share with them and learn from them and then discuss the topic among ourselves. So more social learning happening there. Chambers of Commerce can also be a source of a community of sharing, a community of practice. This morning, the small business owner told you I was talking with earlier, it was because I was presenting at a small business roundtable in Bloomington at the chamber offices over there. So that group meets once a month. Again, small business owners, they're all dealing with common issues, common concerns. Their learning needs are similar in a way. So they come together once a month to talk about best practices in their organizations, to share issues, to share what they've learned and in how to deal with a negative employee or their cash flow management, you know, some of those issues that we talked about in our last Business Minds program last week. So those roundtables that maybe your local chamber offers could be another opportunity for you. And again, if you don't find a community of practice or a community of sharing that fits your needs, establish your own. There's all kinds of opportunities to do that. And with social media, it's easy to create that, put a platform out there for it. And you know, Melissa and I like to think of Business Minds too as being a community of sharing and a community of practice that you can turn to on a weekly basis as well and get that great information. So another thing that you can do under this category of communities of sharing and practice is to curate and share what you're doing with your colleagues. So curate just means to organize information and put it out there in a way that's easy for people to tap into and easy for people to find. I'll give you a real life example of a company that has done this successfully. Keller Williams Realty encourages their agents to create user-generated video content. So yes, you could send your employees out to YouTube and tell them to find some videos on topic XYZ. There's a lot of non-curated content, unfortunately, out on YouTube. You've got to wade through a lot of content you're not looking for in order to find what you are looking for. So Keller Williams decided to tap into the power of social learning by having their agents create their own videos to in turn post back on a company intranet and share those with other employees. So a video about how they've perhaps expanded their business development opportunities, a video about how they provide really unique customer service to their clients. Again, it's a way for people to learn with and each other. So Keller Williams, big corporation, nationwide, how do you do that in your own small business? Well, everybody's got a smartphone these days, pretty much. You could still have employees create user-generated videos and share that content with each other. Just do it in your internal meetings. If you meet once a month, if you meet once a week with your staff meetings, it doesn't have to be video content, but that creates a nice visual dimension, another element that people can tap into. You can be strategic about how you do this too. I was a business professor at Robert Morris University for over 13 years, and the last few years I was there, the university was moving in a strategic direction to intentionally integrate more experiential learning into our classes. I've always used experiential learning, so I jumped on that right away as an opportunity for me to share what I was already doing with my colleagues about experiential learning. What were some examples that I was using in my classes that I could readily share on our Blackboard site? So again, a faculty-generated site. Now they've moved to Google+. Great tool to be able to use to create communities of sharing. And so that's the primary focus. Every post that's out there now on that dedicated Google+ community is for faculty to specifically share what they're doing with regards to experiential learning. So you might not be teaching an allied health course, I'm teaching a business class instead, but you see something that professor is using, and you take that same concept and you say, oh, I could apply that to my marketing class and we could do this. I know I borrowed something that a colleague shared with regards to having students go out and study what makes businesses different in their value chain. And not to go into great detail, but just know that his way of doing that was pretty unique. And I thought that was fantastic. He had pictures posted of the students actually going out to these companies and finding the information, or going to a store and finding a display that Coke had, and it was an example of something they're doing with their marketing strategy and bringing that back in. So that's a wonderful way to be able to share. So sharing what employees are learning and doing. Again, if you send an employee away for a training program, you've made an investment in that, or you perhaps provide tuition reimbursement for employees to further their education. Be intentional by asking them to come back and share what they've learned with their colleagues, and that engages them, but of course it also is sharing the learning and engaging the employees in that as well. Lastly, under that communities of practice category, I want to talk about using meetings as learning communities. A lot of times our meetings are just another boring place, to report out what's coming up next, what are we doing next, who did what, end of discussion. Instead, use things like blue sky thinking activities, used to be called brainstorming. Use affinity diagrams. Use things that are going to be interactive, engage people, share the learning, get people to speak up on things that they might not otherwise share openly by using some of those tools. And they're fantastic. Mindtools.com is a great place to go and learn about how you can use affinity diagrams. So today I've shared 3 ways with you that you can intentionally tap into the power of social learning, feedback, mentoring and coaching, and communities of sharing and practice. It's an honor to provide Business Minds as a primary source of your social learning. And I hope you'll tune in again next week. Melissa will be back, and we'll have a great guest to talk to and coach about her pricing strategy. I'll see you then.
PeoriaLife.com